So we've already mentioned that George Marshall, American Secretary of State, was super opposed to Israel declaring a state. His opposition to Israel, however, was so much so that he opposed even the United Nations partition plan on November 29th. However, the buck stops with the US president. And in 1947, that was Harry S. Truman. Truman made sure that the US voted in favor of the partition plan. However, Truman seems to get cold feet, and he refuses to meet with Dr. Chaim Weizmann, the leader, if you will, representing Israel, nor any of the other representatives of Israel. There is real concern that when Israel would declare independence, that Truman will either be outmaneuvered by the State Department or that he will have changed his mind, or both. Truman tells his White House aides that he doesn't want to talk with anybody about Israel. He's got enough of it. He's got a headache on it. The Jews always want to talk to him. The Jewish leaders understand that without America's recognition of Israel, Israeli independence and the whole initiative of a Jewish state could fail miserably. It was crucial to ensure Truman's support for an independent Jewish state. They needed to talk with him, but they were being locked out. The situation was dire. The Jewish community leaders started to think, how can we get a breakthrough? They put a bunch of coins in a payphone and they called Eddie Jacobson in Kansas City. It turns out that Eddie Jacobson and Truman had served in the army together. And later, Eddie was Truman's business partner in a men's clothing store in Kansas City. The two were good friends. Truman respected Eddie, and Truman allowed Eddie open access to him in the Oval Office. After Eddie got the call, he took a plane to New York and he met with Weizmann. It was decided that the finer details of the situation were complicated and that Eddie would request of Truman to have a meeting with Weizmann. Until now, Truman was not willing to meet anybody. When Eddie got to the White House, he asked Matt McConnelly, one of Truman's aides, if the boss could spare some time for an old friend. And Matt said yes, but sternly told Eddie not to raise the issue of Israel. Truman welcomed Eddie into the Oval Office. And after Eddie raised the topic of Israel and requested of Truman to meet with Weizmann, the president lost his temper. He called Eddie a bald-headed SOB, except he wasn't as polite as I was. But then he agreed to meet Weizmann. Truman was very impressed with Weizmann and agreed to continue to support the Zionist cause and promised to recognize Israel. But he made Weizmann promise not to tell anyone, a promise that Weizmann kept. Even when Ben-Gurion called Weizmann to get a read on whether Washington was going to support an independent Israel, Weizmann would not comment directly on his meeting with the president, but he did urge Ben-Gurion to declare independence. When he did, Truman recognized Israel only 11 minutes after the declaration, the first country to do so. Later on, May 25th, Weizmann was scheduled to come back to the White House to thank Truman for recognizing Israel. The story goes as follows. He realized he didn't have a gift for Truman, and so the new Israeli consulate called the JTS chancellor, Rabbi Louis Finkelstein, and he asked if they could have a menorah to give to Truman as a gift. Finkelstein said that the menorahs have been donated and he couldn't give one away, even as a gift to the president. What he did say was that he had given his son a Torah for his son's bar mitzvah. And the Torah was kept at JTS. And this was his. I don't understand why he said his and not his son's, but he says this was his to give. And so Chaim Weizmann presented a Torah as a gift of thanks to Truman for recognizing Israel. The president loved the Torah. He kept it in the White House while he was president. Afterwards, it went to the Smithsonian Museum until the Presidential Library was completed. And just outside of Kansas City, when the Truman Presidential Library was completed, the Torah is on display as an exhibit on the birth of Israel. Greg, I'm going to ask you to please advance the next slide. And here it is. You can see Truman proudly showing off the Torah that Weizmann just gave to him. And I'm going to ask you to advance one more to the next slide, please. And it seems that for a short period of time, it becomes a place of pilgrimage. When Israelis visited the U.S., and here you can see former Chief Rabbi Unterman at the Truman Library with Truman and the Torah. Next slide, please. Upon retiring from the presidency, Truman spoke to a Jewish audience in New York and was introduced, of course, by Eddie Jacobson as the man who helped bring the state of Israel into existence. Truman says, "What do you mean helped? I'm Cyrus. I'm Cyrus," he says. It's interesting to note that our Hebrew Bible ends with the words of a non-Jew, the most celebrated non-Jew in the Bible, Cyrus, the leader of the Persians, who after conquering the Babylonians allows, maybe even champions, Jews to return from exile to Israel. Truman knew his Bible and saw America as the reincarnated ancient Persian superpower. And Truman saw himself as the reincarnated leader of the ancient Persian superpower, Cyprus. And thanks to Eddie Jacobson, he was able to do in modern times something no less miraculous, perhaps even more than what Cyrus did in ancient times. I have only one word to say, guys. Wow.